Now it's time to meet my first guest on the program today, one of the original hosts of Top of the Pops back in 1964 and a true broadcasting legend. Ladies and gentlemen, Pete Murray.
It's a great band, that. I like the band.
They're good, aren't they?
Yeah, very good. Terrific stuff.
You like a good band, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Has been said.
What a welcome. You see, they love you, Pete.
Yes.
They love you.
Hello.
Yeah.
I don't know who the hell I am.
No, of course they, of course they do.
No,
now, you were an actor when the chance came along to join Radio Luxembourg as a DJ. And I think at that time, most of us didn't know what a DJ was. It was a new job description. What was life like in Luxembourg?
Well, I knew about DJs because I used to listen to AFN. There was a guy called Ralph Muffet, who was a sergeant in the American Army. Marvelous programs he used to do, and so I knew about disc jockeys.
Right.
But I didn't know that I was going to be a disc jockey. My agent, I've just finished touring in a play, and my agent said, "How would you like to go abroad and work on the continent for a bit? I mean, if you pass muster, so to speak." So I said, "How long for?" I said, "About 3 months." I said, "Okay, that's fine." So I went to the Radio Luxembourg studios in London, and they gave me a half a dozen records, which I'd never done anything like that in my life. I just made it up as I went along. And they said, "Well, you've got the job." And the only reason I got the job is nobody else wanted it, because the money was terrible. But, you know, it's funny, if you go back to the 1950s, I was getting £15 a week in Luxembourg, which is an expensive, much more expensive country than here. And it was then, too. But I could live well on it. I lived in a hotel, I ate regular meals, and I saved a bit of money. It's funny. But,
well, I remember listening to you as a boy, because we all listened to Radio Luxembourg because it was the only station that played rock and roll and played good music.
Oh, it was the only station that played popular music at all.
Absolutely.
But the rock and roll came towards the end of my stint there.
Yeah.
That came in 1955, and that's when I left.
But it was a whole generation of people, Pete, who grew up listening to Radio Luxembourg, and the signal was sent from the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. It was bounced across the sea, and by the time it got here, it was like a roller coaster. So you listened to the radio, twiddling the knob, so you were kind of riding it so that you got the best reception.
The funny thing is, it was only London, in the southern part of England, that got the worst reception. The best was Scotland and Ireland. It was perfect there. I don't know why.
Well, can you imagine people doing that now? You know, most radios don't have knobs, do they?
I don't think so.
Sitting there, twiddling the... I mean, you know, you were paying attention to the radio almost like we do now to a television. You married a Luxembourg girl.
I did, yes.
You came back to...
Did you have to mention that? But never mind.
Well, you came back and you brought her back to England, and you hadn't been back long before you were asked to host the, I think I'm right in saying, the first television pop show, 6-5 Special.
Yes. That was an outstanding program in 2 parts. One part not so good, the other part brilliant. Because we had 2 producers. One was Jack Good, who was a genius, and went on to do many successful things, not only here, but in America. And the other was Josephine Douglas, who was what I would describe as very worthy. Very, very worthy. We must do this for the young people. It was playing down, in my opinion.
Now let's move on a little bit, because I mentioned with 6-5 Special, I mean, incredible, this long-running series. How long did it run? 2 or 3 years, maybe?
I'll tell you something. It's sad. I was only in it for a year.
Yeah.
Because we got the sack.
Never mind. In 1964, along came Top of the Pops, and you were one of the 4 original hosts.
Yes, I'll tell you about how that happened. Johnny Stewart, who I'd worked with before, he got into a lot of trouble because when I came back from holiday when I was living in Luxembourg, he asked me to introduce what was then a prime show on BBC Light program called The Showband Show with Cyril Stapleton. And I took over for 2 weeks. They went mad at BBC that they'd employed somebody from a commercial radio station. I was blackballed and he was in trouble. Anyway, Johnny Stewart came back to me in the early 60s and said, look, I'm doing this show, Top of the Pops. I want you to compare it. I said, well, I don't really think I want to do it. And he said, why? I said, well, I'm doing a lot of acting at this moment. I don't want it to, it's by being associated with a pop music show, it'll destroy my acting career. Oh, he said, well, would you do it once every now and then? I said, yeah, I'll do it once now. I don't want to do it permanently. Oh, he said, I'm sorry about that. I said, no, it's all right. So what happened, he brought in Jimmy Savile, David Jacobs, and Alan Freeman. We were the four. David Jacobs didn't last very long in it because it's not really my scene, he used to say. So David Jacobs disappeared and they brought in Simon D for a while. And it went on. I was with Top of the Pops doing it on that schedule once every 3 weeks for 8 years. We finished in 71, as far as I was concerned. And Alan Freeman as well. He finished in 71.
It was done originally from a converted church in Dickinson Road.
Yes, it was done
Manchester.
in a place called Didsbury in Manchester. Converted church. And of course, in those days, they used to mime to records. Now, you used to read people in the press say, oh, miming, this is disgusting. They still say it today. If somebody mimes on a television show, they do it because they're moving. That's why. They never complained. Do you realize that not one single film, not one musical is without miming? What did Bing Crosby do? What did Frank Sinatra do? They mimed to the soundtrack. What did Fred Astaire do? They mimed, they put his dance steps in after he'd done the dancing. So miming is nothing. Yeah. But the reason they stopped the miming is the musicians' union said, we want more work for our musicians. This is fine. I don't mind that.
You are the one surviving of the original.
I'm not sure about that. Am I still here?
You really are. You're the daddy of the DJs. We're your illegitimate children, Pete.
Yes, I wasn't going to say what they called them.
Yeah, but I wanted to ask you about Jimmy Savile because obviously, there's been, a great deal of controversy about Jimmy Savile in recent times. And did you know him at all?
Yes, I did. I first met Jimmy Savile when I was a friend of mine called Pat Campbell, who was a plugger with RCA Records and a great friend of mine. And I said, I'm playing up in Leeds, come with me. Not Leeds, in Nottingham. Well, he said, yeah, I'd like to come. He said, we ought to go and see Jimmy Savile. He lives in Leeds. It's only a few miles up the road. I said, oh, all right, who's Jimmy Savile? He said, oh, he's the manager of the Locarno. Manager of the Locarno? I said, yes. He said, oh, he's very successful, and he's got a Rolls Royce and an E-Type Jag. I said, well, is the manager of Locarno? He said, yes. I can't believe it. I mean, we're talking about money, big money. And you know how he made his money when he was up there? He didn't take any salary. He had the concession to the cloakroom. And he was tax-free.
Yes, he was very shrewd, of course, but did you have any idea of his other...
No, he had young ladies who all adored him. And when we saw him, they were all hanging around him. But, I love Jim, they used to say. I love Jim. The thing about Jimmy Savile was that people would meet him and go, oh. But once he got there, he wooed people. He was incredibly charming. He was a charming man. He made you feel. Last time I saw him, he said, oh, Pete, how nice to see you. You look wonderful. I look like hell. But he made me feel good. I thought, well, he's not such a bad fella. But Jimmy's success was his charm. Yes. He charmed. People would say, oh, I can't bear that man. I said, give him the time, you'll like him.
I think none of us got to know him at all. He didn't have pals among the other DJs.
Not really, no.
So I think, although we might have heard rumours, there wasn't anything we could do because, as you know,
there's nothing you can do.
You can't act on rumours.
I used to say, the press used to say to me, I said, well, if you know anything about it, why don't you explain? Well, we can't do that, he said. So I said, why? He said, because of all the work he does for charity. So I said, you're letting him get away with it because of the work he does for charity? That's why he's doing the work for charities. That was the point.
Before you go, let's see Pete in action on Top of the Pops. Here he is.
There he is, Long John Baldry. You know something? That gives me great personal satisfaction that John has done so well, because 2 years ago on this very show, John was in the audience, and I put him out of the audience and said, don't worry, John, one day you're going to make it. You're going to make it next year. So I was out a year, but he's made it, and made it in a big way, and couldn't happen to a nicer fella. Good luck to you, John. Right now we move on to our next record. It didn't make #1 in the charts, but it's still a beautiful record, and certainly one of my favorites. It's called Zabadak by one of my favorite groups, Dave D, Dozy, Beacon, Mick and Titch.
Pete, you haven't changed a bit.
Oh! Yeah, I told you need glasses.
Yes. Anyway, thanks so much for coming along today.
My pleasure, and always a pleasure to see you, David.
And to
one
you,
of the nicest guys in the whole of the pop music world, and indeed show business. He's my boy, believe you me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pete Murray, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David.